Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I'll be speaking with Dr. Daniel Kelly about social activism and allyship today. And I'm super excited for both my guests and the topic. I think it's really important. And I also think you're going to just really enjoy this conversation with Dr. Kelly, who should be joining soon. I talk a lot on this platform about, challenging status quo, about being aware and awake to what is no longer serving you and other people. And being a part of the process of change. And what I really love about this conversation with Dr. Kelly, I think, is that it's really going to be additive in terms of really showing us how allyship is really important to make an impact. Daniel, I'm assuming you're signing on with Mel Cass, and I can invite you to join under her handle. I was able to make the request, so it'll be a different name, I think. Let's see if this works. There you go.
Hey, so
Hi.
bit of an issue with my account, but hopefully this.
Oh, well, Melanie, it's great to have you on. No, I'm just kidding. I'm glad we were able to find a solution so we can have this conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And let me know. Do you have a hard stop at 2? I want to make sure we end when you need.
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
The whole conversation.
Okay, cool. So, Dr. Kelly, I was just kind of introducing a little bit about what we're talking about today and how I'm really excited about this topic personally, and how I'm even more excited to have you here on the show to talk about this because you are my chosen family. You're somebody that I really admire and respect, and I'm excited that you're here to not only help me but also the audience around this topic of social activism and allyship. So thank you for your time. I know you are a busy guy.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I think this topic is very important, and it's an exciting time for this topic. So I'm ready to go. So thanks for having.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, ready to go. Let's do it. Let's jump in. So first and foremost, I just love to hand it over to you to share what you want to share about who you are, your background, your story, and what brings you to your passion for this topic today.
Okay, great. So I'm currently the academic director for graduate programs at the New York University Preston Robert Tisch Institute for Global Sport. This is my second year with the Institute. It's been a fantastic journey. Started out in the Bronx, New York. Um, from there went to Miami University for business administration. From there, I did a degree in sports sociology for my master's, and then a PhD in sport management. Um, Activism was something that was instilled in me from my immigrant parents, and so, this all started, from the early days of, understanding the plight of the underserved. The fact that you come to a new country and you don't have the resources that you need, but you have the community, and the community played a major role in not only my success, but the success of my family, plus, a lot of my friends and loved ones, and so just having the understanding of the community, the understanding of family. And as I matriculated through different levels of school and professional obligations and opportunities overseas, just seeing the impact of community. And, that kind of leads me to my work politically. I've done a lot of community organizing in the past years with the Organizing for America campaign. And that was something that was, a fantastic opportunity to see what a group of people could really do. And, even if it's a lofty goal as electing the next president, or, getting changes in the community via a community center or outreach programs for the community, the fact of the matter is that, people make these things happen. And, you really are not meant to find success or to survive in this world by yourself. And so, that's a lesson that I learned from my earlier days in my family. But I think more importantly, I've seen that different groups of communities can have an impact on society when they trust each other and they believe in each other and they work together towards changing the outcomes for the community.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Like having those values instilled early on sound like it was such a big part of who you are and like the work that you wanted to carry throughout your life. Is that kind of fair?
Yeah, yeah. I think, the examples that I was given early in life were, everything was about family. Everything was about community. And, when you're an immigrant in a new country, and for myself being a first generation American, you have the opportunity to, your parents and your community set a strong foundation for you. And so, you have the opportunity to move forward and to progress and to have new opportunities because of
Mm.
what's available, because you have a stable foundation. And I
Mm.
think, throughout my work in sport management and, especially in the global soccer space, I've done a lot of amazing projects in Argentina and Qatar and India. Just having those types of opportunities, they didn't happen because of hard work and grit. It happened because I had support. I had
Mm.
people who believed in my vision and, provided me with opportunities to work hard, but to also, you know, get a leg up when it comes to the fruit of my labor. And so I'm a big proponent of you're not meant to succeed in this world by yourself, and that, the community does play a role in the opportunities that are available for anyone to find success.
Mm. And I want to also say to those who are joining, please, this is, please submit questions, ask whatever you want. That's what this platform is for. So thank you for joining, those who are live and later, who are watching afterwards. Um, and also, I'm curious in what you were just sharing, Dr. Kelly, like, did you seek out that support? You talked about that support being so critical to your success. Like, or did you feel like you magnetized that? Or did you know, like, hey, I need allies in my journey? Like, or was it both, maybe?
And I think it's like I sought it out. Like they always say that the old proverb that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I think the resources are available, and I think what I learned early on is that there are a lot of opportunities that were going to other people, and
Mm.
if I have some of those opportunities, then I needed to say something. And I
Mm.
guess, like they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I mean, if you want the resources, they're available. But, I had to be willing to go for it. I had to be willing to step up and to, accept the opportunities. I think, early on, one of the best things I've always done is I've always said yes. If an opportunity is presented, just, say yes and figure it out later. I think, for my success, it's been kind of, a labor of love. It's been a hard process of paying dues, but a lot of great opportunities may not have seemed like great opportunities at first, but just taking a risk, taking a chance, and overall it ended up working out. Um, I can speak to my time as a professor. I started out at Ohio State, taught some, fantastic classes in educational psychology and was able to get a really good understanding of teaching virtually. So I was teaching virtually like 15 years ago when it was, very niche and very basic. And, that opportunity led me to my first jobs. And so my first jobs in academia, I really got those opportunities because I knew how to teach online. The
Mm.
programs had no clue. And then, of course, we get to COVID-19 and no one is ready for online teaching 100% for real. And so a lot of programs, especially NYU, we ended up going fully remote. And, my background, I had been doing it for 15 or so years. I had built courses online over the years. I had really embraced, educational technology. And so that really came about because as a graduate student at Ohio State, I said yes to an opportunity to teach classes online and to build out the content. And so
Mm.
I got an opportunity to make all my mistakes years ago to where we got to 2020 with COVID-19 limitations and restrictions, and I was good to go.
Wow, yeah. Did you see it as taking a risk back then? Like, oh, like who cares about these online? Or like, did you see it as an exciting opportunity?
Yeah, I think I was surprised that a lot of people saw it as a waste of time or just something they didn't really want to do. I always found it to be exciting because I felt like you could go at your own pace, and I
Mm,
felt that that was the way the world was going to work. People were going to work professionally during the day and take classes at night, but nobody wanted to be in class from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. They'd rather go at their
mm,
own takes a few modules or lessons during their lunchtime or early in the morning when they felt most awake to study. And I think a lot of online platforms have embraced the asynchronous format, which is go at your own pace. And
mm.
people are submitting assignments at 2 in the morning. There's assignments at 8 a.m. I mean, it comes in when it comes in when the person has time. People have family obligations and just other means that are going on in their life. And so
Mm.
the opportunity to be able to say, I want to meet students where they are. I feel like the marketplace is going towards, students having more autonomy. And I knew that 15 years ago. And then we get to COVID and, that's just the way the world is. I mean, people may not want to embrace it, but the asynchronous model is working. And people are, I would say our numbers have doubled and almost tripled due to COVID, in the online space, and a lot of students are registering for the fall, and they're registering for asynchronous courses at their own pace.
So clearly you're a thought leader, right? Clearly you were 15 years ahead of the game in terms of online. I love that phrase, like meeting people where they are. And though I've not clearly been deep into academia in terms of PhD, like I know that those environments are very challenging for minorities and people of color. Um, and like so many other industries that are you know not up to where we need them to be in terms of opportunity, in terms of supporting, in terms of openness. So we're talking today about allyship, right, and social activism. And so like I'm curious about your journey in terms of, like, I guess, how do you define like activism, and how do you find ways to navigate spaces that maybe aren't open from the minute that you walk in and you have to do some navigating, like what I'd love to hear your experience with that.
Yeah, I guess my philosophy with activism is, it's kind of like my philosophy with teaching. You got to meet people where they are. One thing I liked about Barack Obama was that he understood that, you know, in order for him to win the presidency, he had to be the president of everyone. He couldn't just be the black president. He couldn't just be the biracial president. He had to be America's president. And, he gets a lot of flack and a lot of complaints at times for his style of being too pragmatic. But I think, if you want everyone to be happy, you really do have to make some concessions. And so, when it comes to my activism, it's understanding that different people have different points of view. And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to be as effective as possible to meet the needs of the majority. And so, when I say that, that means everybody's not going to be happy. And so, when it comes to activism, the goal is to get your voices heard and to make sure that the disenfranchised or underserved groups are feeling, and not only feeling, but they're knowing that their voice is being heard. So whether that is a platform via social media, whether that is a meeting with an authority and in society space, whether that be a political party or a mayor's office, or just making sure that the voices are being heard, and that the expectation is that it's going to be steps towards a solution. I think at times with activism, people believe that it's one march, it's one sit-in, it's one social media post that gets the change, and is actually sustained change over time that leads to societal changes. When you're trying to undo a system that was been in place for years, it's going to take years to undo it, and that's just the nature of the beast. There's a lot of people who have benefited from the system being the way it is, and so people are not always quick to change. And I think a lot of times people see activism and allyship as a race. They don't understand it to be a marathon, and so they see it
Mm,
more as a sprint. And I think that the longevity of trying to get everybody on the same page, understanding that, hey, it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm dealing with students who are interested in activism, for instance, at NYU, the NYU women's basketball team, phenomenal group of women, ages 18 to 22, fantastic majors, fantastic personalities, vibrant group, and overall they're winners. They came from winning programs in high school, and they are programmed and dedicated and disciplined to win. And so for them, they put together a campaign last fall, which was amazing. They did a voter registration drive, and they got 99.9% of the student athletes on campus. I think it was like 396 out of 400, but excuse me, registered to vote for the 2020 election. Fantastic number. Now, my challenge to them afterwards was, okay, you got the registrations. What's next? The
Mm-hmm.
This is phase one. Like that's, to sustain your momentum, to sustain your activism, it really doesn't have an end date, which is like election day, because there's always going to be midterms. There's always going to
Mm-hmm.
be local elections. There's always going to be something else to look forward to. And your activism should be able to sustain and move forward to continue to build momentum. So that way, when every election comes around, you're maintaining that registration number at 99.9% or 100%. And,
Mm-hmm.
in my conversations with them, I talked about the process of awareness, the process of longevity, the process of, continuing the legacy so that even when this current group graduates, the group behind them picks up the baton and continues the efforts. And I think that's what, most times people think of advocacy, they think of it as, okay, the goal is the election, the goal is this event, and when we get to growth and to understanding and to getting to that goal, everything ends. And I think that's when it begins, because now you've established that you can get something done in a short amount of time, but can it maintain for the next one? Is your platform, is your instrument in place that is going to be able to sustain over time? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was my challenge to them. And, they've accepted it. They continue to pump out programming on activism and allyship, and using their relationships to leverage opportunities for women in sport, for minorities in sport, and just opportunities to build, a platform that they can be proud of and a legacy that they've established. And I think that's something that, university students have an opportunity for. They have a lot of leverage and leeway. I think community organizing groups have a platform as well. And I think, it just transcends colleges, universities, communities. It transcends into life. And
Mm-hmm.
so seeing the platforms and seeing the fruits of their labor and the opportunities for the future, and getting them to be more future minded when it comes to enacting change is the goal when it comes to allyship and activism.
I love that because what it really makes me think of is, oftentimes, like you said, you have these spurts, you have these sprints, they could often be fueled by anger and rage and things that, like things that are happening and being visible, right, in the media. And then there's some action and then it can really fall off. And it makes me think of like, if you really value being a part of a solution, if you really value being an ally and making changes, um, for this and future generations, then it's kind of like, well, what is the vision? Like almost like you would treat a business plan. Like, what is it that you want to see change, and get really clear on that, um, in terms of like how you want to go after that, and then enlist the support. So, like you said, so that it's lasting and not temporary. Because I feel like sometimes what happens is, yeah, like you said, you like that basketball team, like they reach the goal and then it's like, okay, one and done, versus like you said, this is like step one. Um, so how do you like? I'm curious if you see it as like as a as somebody that comes from the business world, right? Um, like the vision and the what is the change that you want to see, and really identifying that, or do you see it differently in terms of how do you articulate how you want to play a role in activism.
Yeah, I think you kind of said it the right way. I mean, everybody has a different role in activism. So I think one of the things I really value is cultural agility. You mentioned it earlier. I've worked with different groups, and every group has a different item that's important to them. Rule number one of politics is that politics is local, and that's a very important statement because people seem to think that because it matters to them, it matters to everyone, and that's just not the case.
Mm,
You know, if someone is impacted by an issue, it brings about a different level of sensitivity, a different level of response, and so being cognizant that every issue is going to have a different level of concern, a different level of empathy, a different level of support, and being able to understand how or where do these opportunities or these issues intersect. And the successful ones like Obama's change and hope, or Joe Biden's America United campaign. I mean, those campaigns are intersections of different areas that Americans as a whole care about. And even to a lesser extent, I hate to give props to him, but Trump did run a campaign on bigotry and hate, and he was able to galvanize the community around that. That got 72 million votes in the last election. So, there are ways to find, activism and allyship. It may not always be for the right causes, per my opinion, but I think it always has an intersection of a way to reach out there and make an important emphasis in what's important to people. And so,
mm-hmm,
a major component, as I mentioned earlier, what I believe in is cultural agility. Speaking the language, speaking the culture, speaking the understanding of what it means to be an activist and what it means to align yourself with allies who all intersect at the same points of interest, where the politics are in alignment. And I think it's easier said than done. But on a college campus, the one thing you do have like, kind of goes for yourself is that you do have people who are high achievers, people who are interested, and they're in an environment that is conducive to activism. And so it's an opportunity where once they leave and enter the real world, they may not be in that same kind of community space where the activism and the issues align. And so you have to work a bit harder in the real world, and finding resources and finding support and being able to leverage those resources and support towards your cause. And so it's
mm-hmm.
not, but on a college campus, you do have like-minded people who are interested in change.
Well, and I think the same honestly goes in corporate, right? Like, because you have so many people that are passionate about building diverse, pipelines of talent. You have a lot of passion for people that want all voices to be heard, in order to, and everybody to feel seen. I think there's, there maybe not in the in the parts of the organization with all the power, unfortunately. Um, but it makes me think about even in those environments, um, when I was in the corporate space and, I had certain beliefs and values, and I really looked at it like it's on me to make the choices to do something. But I never really thought of it like how do I, okay, like, how do I really rally other people and say, look, like, let's tackle this one thing in our organization or on our team, so that we can really drive it forward in an even more impactful way than like me just kind of operating on my own. Um, because I think it is possible to find allies. I think it's, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I think part of it is just being willing to engage in conversations, engage in difficult conversations, and say, hey, look, like this guy keeps shutting down these voices in these meetings, and like I don't think it's okay, and I think we should try to do something about it for just as example. But I think that those types of things take courage, and I think it takes a recognition that like we can be more impactful with change when we have a few people in our corner versus a lone voice.
Yeah, you brought up a very, common occurrence when it comes to business, especially corporate business. A lot of times, great ideas, are they go unheard. especially if you don't have the support in the room. You know, they say that war is politics with blood, and politics is war without blood. You know, when you're dealing with a corporate American environment, a lot of times women and minorities are at a disadvantage because they don't have the same social capital. Um, you know, how do I say this? Okay, so without being too philosophical, when it comes to navigating the corporate culture, advice I always give to my consulting clients and to my peers and my students is, before you go into any meeting, you should socialize your ideas with your colleagues. That way when it shows up in a meeting and it's time for you to share your ideas, you have support in the room. Um, Now, of course, in a competitive corporate environment, that could come back to bite you as somebody can steal your idea. But I think when you share your ideas with people you trust, you increase the amount of support you have in the room, and at least your voice is being heard instead of being, overshadowed or pushed out. And so I think it gives you a fighting chance in the room when you have socialized your ideas into where at least when you go in there, you know if you're going to have support or not. Because you may socialize it and realize that, hey, it's probably going to be pretty divisive, or I can't get any support, and it saves you a lot of face in your corporate meetings. And so socializing your ideas before you go into a session, you're able to see if it's going to be able to pull some type of momentum. And what it does is it gives you an opportunity to make sure your voice is heard, and also that you have the support that is needed to push your idea to the front towards making sure that it happens in the meeting.
Mm.
Um, that same process works in business and politics and society as a whole. If you try to push an idea that is not being heard appropriately in the right context, it can be pulled into so many different directions. And before you know it, you're trying to defend the idea in the meeting more so than answering questions for clarity. And so the key is that you socialize it because you want to be able to get to the concrete notions of what the idea can do in the meeting if it's being processed appropriately. And so you socialize it with your peers as a means of, fact checking, as a means of troubleshooting the idea before it gets to the full presentation. And so at that point, you're mainly answering questions about clarity more so than defending the authenticity of the topic.
That advice is just like solid gold right there. I mean, that's like, I think, yeah, right. Karen's like, yeah, that's a great tip. It really is. I think we don't necessarily learn about the politics of the work that we do. And how are we influential? I mean, we're kind of crisscrossing a little bit. Like, how are we influential just to get our jobs done, right? And to get our initiatives through. And also, how can we be influential in these bigger social justice, social activism, kind of plights? And what it makes me think of is, like when you gave the example of the basketball team, right? Like there was a very, pointed goal, right? Like get these people to vote, right? And that in some ways can be a lot easier. You can see the progress you're making. You can feel good about what you're doing, as opposed to how can, like, for example, making sure there is more space for diverse voices to be heard in the boardrooms or in the rooms where decisions are being made, or even in longer term things like talent pipelines. And so I don't know how you feel about this, but I think part of this work, the part of why the longevity is so challenging and why the marathon is challenging for people, is because if they're not seeing the progress or they're not seeing the results, it can be hard to keep that energy up. So I'm curious, like, what advice would you have to keep the marathon going for these long haul things? Like you said, it's going to take time to undo years of white supremacy and every other issue that that we experience. So how can we, you know, help people stay in it for the long term, even if they're not seeing exactly the changes that they want when they want it?
Yeah, there's like a three-step process that is used for activism, or any kind of campaigns. I think that's pretty much what activism is. It's like a campaign. It's a campaign that is, towards a goal. A campaign should be mission-driven. It should be measurable, and the goal should be obtainable. And so, as long as you stick to your messaging, stick to your mission, that way you never lose your authenticity, you never lose your total output for why you're doing this effort. It should be measurable, which means that you should be able to see that you're making progress, and they should have many goals that are obtainable. So, for example, with the young women from NYU's basketball program who put together that fantastic fundraising, crowdsourcing campaign for registrations, they were able to document how many teams they had, the full rosters from the team, so they could tell who registered and who didn't.
Mm.
So if the goal was to get every student athlete on campus registered by the registration deadline last fall, then they could tell that they can get 50% by 30 days out. 15 days out, they should have 85%. They should have 100% by the deadline. And so, they're able to see that these goals are obtainable because they have the data to back it up. And when I worked for Obama's campaign in 2012, that was the key to success. Imagine a community organizing platform where it was data driven. We inputted data on a nightly basis, and so every phone call, every canvas, every person we spoke to was logged into the system. And what that means is that it's accountable to how many contacts you have had in different areas and how many votes are you able to generate. And so if you have enough contacts in the neighborhood, then you know exactly where the efforts should be put towards a neighborhood with the lower contacts. And so that way you're not double dipping your work. You can strategize and make sure you're hitting all the touch points for all the different communities that need to be interacted with. And that was a major benefit because that's where they knew where to put the media buys because of all the data they collected. And so the money's not just going to every single market, it's going out to specific markets where the numbers are lower or higher based on the data system. And so, if you do a microcosm of organizing for America and you do organizing for NYU student athletes, it's easier to track that system. It stays within your mission, the goals are obtainable, and you reach all of your objectives through the data. Of course, is all measurable. And so having that three-part system of making sure it's mission driven, making sure it's measurable, and that you have the mini goals towards the big goal, it's a better plan than having no type of plan with activism.
I love it. And you can apply that, to an individual, right, who feels strongly about this work and being involved, because I think, for example, like I look at myself and I could say, look, I'm really passionate about opportunities for all, for example, and maybe I can set my own goal. Say I want to have 5 conversations a month, with people towards that mission. I'm kind of making it up as I go, but like if I could set those types of goals, those mini goals for myself, to then sustain, I think that principle of mission driven, measurable, and mini goals, we can apply it to ourselves, and we can even apply it to our organizations and what we're trying to accomplish within, whether it's organizations, community, wherever it is you want to stand up and be a part of the fight and be an ally. I think it really translates in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best part about it. I think community organizing, the first time I heard the term, I just remember I was so enamored with it. I was in the Global Social Change Institute at NYU Wagner. This is in 2011, and I got accepted into the program. It was the first cohort for the Global Social Change Institute, and it was a fantastic experience where I got a chance to be on campus with community organizers from Colombia, from Mexico, from Ethiopia, from Germany, from all these different countries, all coming to America to learn about the history of community organizing. And this kind of lit a fire into me because I remember thinking that this system is things that I've already done, but I was so unorganized with it, and so it just gave me a full understanding of how activism works and how to put it all together towards an understanding of how you can impact your society, your community. And I have a very activist-based background. I was in the Boy Scouts of America. I played basketball for some of the top programs in New York City. I was in my college fraternity, Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and so I just had many different opportunities. Plus my family background with my church, and so it just seemed to be able to kind of close the loop on all the activism that I was doing. It really gave me an understanding of how to make sure it could be more purposeful, make sure it's more mission driven, and to understand that it should be measurable, that there should be objectives and goals. And so just seeing all the community organizing efforts, to learn about Barack Obama's attempts at community organizing, all of his wins and his failures in the past, seeing how a lot of politics is community organizing, and you can really find success when you're able to really understand the difference. And so it kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I love all the examples you gave, and you're giving a shout out to Scouting, Girl Scout alum over there with Karen. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people also that don't have that sense of community and support and building outside of ourselves. I think that there is a lack of that in so many regards in our society today. And so I think you do have a lot of individuals out there trying to, you know, uh, puddle around, whether it's educating themselves and reading and entering this space. I think you have a lot of people entering this space of activism and allyship, and I'm not sure everybody really has a sense of how can I really be a part of that change in a meaningful way. Um, and then it's I think we can easily discredit our initiatives, our efforts, as I said earlier, if we're not seeing change. And I'm curious, because I talk about it Tuesday, we go deep and we get real. And so I know there's a lot of people that are trying to educate themselves. There's a lot of talk about what not to do, in that plight in terms of you know uh, engaging and asking people for help that it's not their burden to carry. For example, white people asking, people of color to educate them um, is something that's even more triggering. And so I'm curious for people out there that are I want to do more. I don't know how to do more, or I don't know where to start, or I'm afraid to ask, and for people to get upset or backlash or all of that bullshit. What a counsel would you have to say for those people?
So I wrote an op-ed for the Sports Business Journal last October. It was titled, the NBA has opened the door for activism and allyship, but more can be done. The National Basketball Association is something that I really hold dear to. I've supported them for years, and I think as an organization, they're probably the premier sports organization in the country. Um, they had that same question. I will say the majority of the owners in the NBA are white, and the league's players are predominantly black. And the bottom line is, where can the league support the players by more than just providing spaces for activism, providing Black Lives Matter on the jerseys, on the court, and all the racial justice messaging, education reform, and say her name, Breonna Taylor, all those different slogans. When is the action item going to be more than that? And I think when it comes to social justice and social activism and allyship, I think the hope is that white privilege can be seen as something that is real. I think it's a general acknowledgement of white privilege that it goes unspoken, and I think it's something that we're seeing a lot of athletes are speaking out against because they feel as though it's right there, it's prevalent, but you still want me to explain it to you. I think that's
Mhm.
the issue when it comes to allyship. I think, it's an understanding that the system is broken and there has to be ways to fix it, but we want you to come to it consciously understanding where the system is. If a minority person has to explain white privilege, then that battle is already done. Um, Robin DiAngelo, she wrote a fantastic book, about understanding, how to be anti-racist. Ibram Kendi also wrote a book on anti-racism as well. These are prominent authors. Robin DiAngelo is a white woman, and she writes it from a white woman's perspective of
Mhm.
understanding, her role and what she needs to do to come to the table prepared to have these types of conversations. Ibram Kendi, he does his research and he speaks to it from a point of view as a black man who has had to explain,
Mhm.
what it is to be racist and white privilege. And so I think Robert DiAngelo, Ibram Kendi, they kind of set the table for the two sides of how to manage those conversations. Robert DiAngelo, she's a white woman. She brought to the table with her work her perspective on the mistakes she's made. And
Mhm.
I think her book does provide a blueprint for being proactive when it comes to the conversation, educating yourself to
Mhm.
understand that the racial disparities, the systemic racism, and all of the, dearth of opportunities, resources for minorities. And so when you come to the conversation educated and informed, it's a lot easier to be able to have those tough conversations and to see where they can be an ally in the activism. But I think sometimes when a lot of potential allies don't take that first step to do the research and to come to the conversation informed, then the minority person feels as though they're beating a dead drum.
Mhm. Yes, I mean, thank you for your honesty in that, and it's kind, it kind of makes me think of, like if you are going, if you're going to a meeting, and you're going to talk about something, you're gonna make sure you know what you're talking about. You're gonna make sure you're briefed on the project. You know where things have been. You know what you want to do. You know what you want to like, offer, and so you would come prepared. And I think that like, it's like a parallel to say, yeah, and do your preparation for this work too. Because I think also, my perspective, and I think what you're saying is right. The conversations can be richer and there can be more openness if you're showing, hey, I've like educated myself. I've started the process, or I'm on the journey, and I'd love to bounce some thoughts off of you or ideas or get your perspective. And I think that's just a respectful way too of doing this work, of taking ownership of doing individual work and prepping yourself to find your allies and to be an ally to others. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's why I brought up Barack Obama earlier. I said
mhm,
however people feel about him politically, when it came to being pragmatic and getting things done, one of his major assets was that, he was able to get an informed group of white counterparts to vote alongside him. You know,
mm,
across the aisle, whether they were Democrat or Republican, he was able to get the votes. And if they don't have a full understanding of what it means to be an ally or full understanding of, hey, the system is broken, then how can they really help? So I think, they were willing to have the tough conversations. Obama was willing to meet them where they were, meet them halfway, meet them, in their personal journey to figure out ways that they can align themselves together. And I
mhm,
think, that example is not a perfect example. It's just an example of a way for allyship and activism to work. And I think the reason why the civil rights movement, the reason why a lot of global social change movements work is because there are allies out there that are willing to meet people halfway and meet them
mhm,
where they are. And that's the only way the change is going to work, because it can't just be a diversity issue. It can't just be an inclusion issue. It has to be a human issue. And when it's a human issue that impacts all groups, that's when the allies come in, because they can understand where it impacts them and how this is a problem. And that's when you get the support to bring it back because it's a human issue.
Yes.
Terms like diversity, equity and inclusion can be pretty divisive. And I
Mhm.
mean, it shouldn't be that way. At NYU, I love the fact that we have transitioned from DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to IDBEA, which stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, belonging, and access. And so,
Mm.
access. So sorry, IDBEA. Yeah. So I'll say it again: inclusion for
Mhm.
I, D for diversity, B for belonging, E for equity, and A for access. And so that IDBEA acronym touches upon much more than DEI. It touches upon students with disabilities, touches upon, inclusion, belonging. It touches upon all the different points of access for everything, for
Mhm.
people, humans to come together. And what it does is it doesn't exclude anyone. It
Right.
includes everyone. And so it becomes a human conversation, more so than a diversity conversation, which lets some groups find a way for themselves to be excluded. So when you include everyone in the conversation, then you're being more inclusive. Then you're finding a way to make sure there's belonging in the community. And what you've done is that you have established now a community of humans. And humans, people can get behind that. They can
Yes.
align themselves with that. I think that's kind of what makes NYU special, because it's probably one of the most progressive universities in the country. They really embrace a lot of the diversity in the community, whether it be LGBTQ, African American, Asian American, and a lot of the underserved communities in the world. And they do a great job of providing resources and support services for them. And I think because they have embraced it, you have an environment, a community of people who get it. And
Mm.
I've been at different schools at different cities, and every school is not like that. Every school is still using some of the outdated jargon like DEI, when IDBEA is the proper pronouns and
Mm.
actually the proper focus when it comes to inclusion.
Oh, I love that. And it reminds me of the word that you used, I think today and in our pre-call around intersectionality, right?
Yeah.
And like, right. And here we are in Women's History Month. And I'm proud to have a man on this show, because there's still, work needs to be done everywhere. And it's not about dropping this group or dropping that group. It's like, no, it's equity for all. And like you said, it's a human issue, and how can we make it human? And I love like this acronym, feels more inclusive by nature. And I think, yeah, there's like, I don't know what it is about, you know the reality is that I think, at the end of the day, when you talk about DEI, you're talking about dismantling white supremacy. And like, that's really what, like, that's really what it is. But let's not water it down. Like, let's really be honest about, you know, what it is we are trying to change. And I think sometimes we're not using actually the language that is actually truly impactful, because there's shame or there's embarrassment or whatever's going on. So I think some of it is like like we have to be bold in our language because language matters, and we need to jar people. I mean, this is just me. My perspective is like sometimes we have to be jarring, because it's just so easy to ignore um, language that doesn't have tension in it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
I will say this, though. I think one of the things I've learned throughout my career is that, you know, IDBEA, it does set a foundation for allies. But remember, everyone is not interested in IDBEA, and that's
right.
just the way the world is. And I think, but what it does do, it provides a platform for allies to come and know where they can support and how they can support, and it meets them where they are. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, you know, for me, fundamentally, DEI should not be a diverse term, but it is pretty divisive. And so IDBEA does bring a breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion, the diversity, the the equity, the belongingness, the access. It just it just meets people where they are. Someone can find one of those acronyms and say, hey, I can get down with inclusion, or I
Mm-hmm.
understand access. You know, I'm a person with disability and I just can't get access to things,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm part of a marginalized group and I just can't, whether it's because of socioeconomic status, I just can't be a part of it, or I've been excluded from it. And so what it does is it provides a way for all of those who have been underserved to find a commonality of where they can serve. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I think, for me, you want this to be a human issue because you want people to see it as, hey, it's good for everyone. But I think for me, I'm looking forward to the people who want to support because it's the right thing to do and it means something to them. Whether it's the students at NYU women's basketball, whether it's my work with the NBA and their work with the voter registration drives. LeBron James had a More Than a Vote website that was, amazing. It talked about, providing rides for people to get to the polling stations. It talked about where the actual polling stations were located, and it even had a $15 ride credit from Lyft, to get people to and from the polling stations. Those types of things, a lot of people didn't know about them. So if it just brings awareness to it, I'm all for it. If it touches upon any person that's looking to support or find a way to be more involved, I think there's opportunities out there. But I think, by following the IDBEA, model, that gives them a better understanding of how to support, how to be inclusive, how to be an ally.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, something that this work brings up for me also is that like I think if you're really doing this work, um, and you're pushing your own envelopes, I think you're going to make mistakes, and I think there's a big fear around making those mistakes. And so I'm curious, given the longevity of you being in this work and maybe even seeing other people making mistakes, maybe even making some mistakes yourself, like um maybe the question is around like how can people recover from those mistakes, or how can we like allow those mistakes to be an accepted part of the process rather than a hindrance to going deeper. I'm just curious what your thoughts on that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, me personally, a lot of my activism has been through trial and error. As I said, I've been, this is kind of like a journey, a life journey. So almost a labor of love. My activism has been from, soup kitchens with my church to fraternity fundraising for voting drives um, to homelessness to, figuring out ways to community organize to help Obama get reelected. And so for me, I think it comes full circle when, you see the mistakes from your past. You're like, okay, well, that wasn't really organized. And thankfully, I had a platform. I had an opportunity to be able to change that. I think for me, it was all right. So I see all the mistakes that I've made, and community organizing something I'm very passionate about. This campaign with Organizing for America is something that, is going to provide me with an opportunity to get a hands-on feel for what it should be. And, from there, I just saw how it really transcended the Barack Obama campaign for 2012 to my professional work. If I wanted to get things done, I had to follow those same metrics. I had to be mission driven. I had to be data driven and measurable, and I had to have goals, like many tactics and goals along the way to get to my big goal. And so, what I learned is that you really can't do it by yourself. No matter how passionate you are, no matter how prideful you are, you're meant to succeed in this world by being a part of a collective.
Mhm.
And whether that's your family unit, your work unit, or your community unit, overall the success comes from the collective.
What I mean, yeah, I love that sentiment. We don't have to do it on our own, and that the real impact comes from the collective, like you said. Um, and I know we're coming to, the end of our time together, and there was something that you said in our pre-call um, that stuck with me, which is that hope has to have a destination.
Yeah.
I mean, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things I've learned. I think, if the goal for Obama in 2008 or 2012 was to get him elected, I mean, that was a part of the goal. The destination is, where do we want America to be as a country? And I think that's what made his campaign so special. He was talking about hope for the future and change, and even Biden talking about uniting the country because it's pretty split. And so, you know, when they can have a tangible set of goals along the way, you can start to see the picture. You know,
Mm.
so when I said to the group from NYU, hope has a destination. Where do you want this to be for your legacy in the future? Do you want it to be where, you know, women who come to play basketball at NYU know that in addition to playing basketball, activism is a part of the legacy of the program. And so what it does is it attracts a different type of person that wants to come to your program. Yes, they want to come and be successful in basketball. They want to get a fantastic education at NYU, but they also know that it comes with, a standard that they must uphold. It comes with a legacy. And I think when you have a legacy that is attached to your activism, it's a game changer. You know, the Rainbow Coalition out of Chicago is special because, from the days of Fred Hampton when he started it to Jesse Jackson when he continued it, there was a community base of building among different types of people. That's why they call the Rainbow Coalition. It's black, white, Asian, Puerto Rican. It's a conglomerate of different communities working together to build the entire community. And, that legacy was established and it had a destination which was for equality of all people, not only in Chicago, but across the country. And so, when you have a legacy, your hope can be the destination and it can lead to you having more of a permanence for your organization. And so,
Mm.
like NYU, people know it has a permanence. It has a brand for, excellent education, diversity, belonging, equity, access. Those are the things that are synonymous with NYU, and that is part of their destination. People know that when they go there, they hope to get in because their hope is going to lead them down a path of these types of experiences. And for activism, it should follow that same game plan. It should have a destination, and the destination should be built on what you hope you're going to get out of it in the future.
Man, I love that, and I love it also for organizational cultures that are struggling to find ways to, drive engagement with employees to mean something bigger than themselves, bigger than the product that they're putting out there. And that can be a great way to attract talent to have a deeper purpose and mission, that coincides, with, of course, what the organization's all about and the values. So thank you for sharing that. Like, I think that it's something for everybody to ponder how we can think like that about what is, yeah, like what is that destination? What is that legacy that we want to leave um, as individuals and also as a collective in however we define that for ourselves. Yeah, so I guess thank you again for your time. I know we covered a lot of ground, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that you want to leave people with, any final thoughts or anything we didn't cover that you think is really important about this topic.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, you know, I know activism is a hot button topic right now, but I want people to remember that activism, community organizing, the key is the word community. It has to be about helping people. And, I really want to make sure that I really hone in on that point that you're not really meant to find success in this world by yourself. It's meant to be part of a collective. And you'll find that you'll go further as a group, pulling together, managing resources towards a goal. And so I think, based on all the different examples I've given from NYU and women's basketball, the National Basketball Association, Barack Obama's campaigns to the Rainbow Coalition out of Chicago. You know, in the end, they all found success and built a legacy as a team, as a group. And I think that's something that, you know, for all the individual success you could have in the world, there's still a team of people behind you, pushing you and guiding you along the way. Whether it's Serena Williams, it's, you know, um, any of the top tennis players, basketball players, baseball players in the world, or individual athletes out there, they always have a team behind them and that are as much a part of the success as the athlete was. And so just keep in mind that you'll go further as a group.
Thank you so much. And for those, I know you signed on under a different account, but for those who might want to engage with you further or even talk to you about your sports management consulting firm or the work that you do at NYU, how can they best get in touch?
The best way to get in touch with me is Instagram, at Dr. Daniel Kelly, or through email, which is fine. So that's public as well. That's dgk2 at nyu.edu.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on this platform, for taking the time to share your wealth of knowledge in this area, and for giving me definitely lots to think about in the work that I do as well. So,
All right, glad to help. I'll talk to you soon.
all right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. And thanks for joining, everyone.